folks in if we want to get going. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue. Welcome online and in person to Concordia University's fourth space. Thanks so much for joining us for Aggregate Multitude Queer Disorientations in VR. Before we launch into it, I'd just like to remind everyone that we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. And we make this acknowledgement to bring awareness and understanding of the history of Indigenous peoples and their territories that we occupy. At Fourth Space, we work with our Concordia community of faculty, students, and staff to activate the ongoing research projects and various initiatives at the university with the goal really of co-creating knowledge and building some community. And we do so by producing these daily hybrid events that you've just walked into online or in person. So welcome once again. All of our events are free and open to all. And this week we've been working with a research creation collective here at the university made up of folks from DIGS and FMS. I think Jesse's there to introduce T and Hex more fully for this specific event, so I'll be passing the floor to Jesse. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Hello, welcome. I am very excited to be introducing T and hexe.exe for this talk, Aggregate Multitude, Queer Disorientations in VR. And I was really lucky that I got to try it, getting a tour from both of them, Hex in the virtual world and T guiding me through the physical world. So this project explores queer disorientation through VR sound and writing. T and hexe.exe worked with a fixed set of assets that included 3D models, texts from Sarah Ahmed's Queer Phenomenology, and collaborative poetry to create two parallel but interconnected virtual worlds. So T is an interdisciplinary artist pursuing a PhD in humanities at Concordia. Their work explores how queer VR enthusiasts envision the metaverse, creating gender-affirming content and form virtual communities. They are currently conducting interviews and co-creating virtual worlds with trans artists in the social VR platform, VRChat. And Marie Hinson is a queer and trans artist raised in Appalachia, now practicing poetry, performance, and film in New York City. She is a virtual reality cyberpunk goth, building immersive performance environments in cyberspace as hexe.exe. All right, so thank you to our audience for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you, Anne-Marie.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen and start this slideshow. Okay, so as Jesse just said, this project is a collaboration between me and Marie, or hexe.exe. I'm here in the physical world, and as you can see, Hex is joining us virtually as her avatar. She's in VR chat right now. And we came together to create this project called Aggregate Multitude. So this is a screenshot of the world that we created. You'll see a little bit more later. But what you're seeing are Hex's body, my body, both multiplied. We're stuck in this virtual glitch, and we're, I don't know, very multiplicitous. So I'll let Hex introduce herself.
Hi, hello. I'm kind of struggling with the Zoom. There it is, I think. Okay. Hello. Hi, yeah, this has been a couple months in the works and even longer talking with T. It's been really exciting to meet someone else in VR who is, I don't know, there's just so much that happens in an experiential way. I mean, it's queer phenomenology and lived development here that is kind of happening among queer and trans people all over the world. And so it's really exciting to be able to talk talk about that and bring some ideas around that. So yeah, just a quick introduction to me and my work and what I'm doing. I've been doing social VR and VR chat for a couple of years now. And I have a background in film and poetry and performance, experimental sound. And so I'm kind of, I do that. I do performances in VR, and I've been experimenting with this different characters that are kind of demon people, cyberpunk, straight out of like a Y2K music video kind of thing. This kind of like snapshot of technological aesthetics, this kind of utopia that never happened. Yeah, so I do performances in VR and outside of VR, and I have been doing a live streaming social practice as a on Twitch, where I'm in virtual reality and I'm going around all of these weird user created worlds, and having this live streaming for an audience of queer and trans people all over the world, where I'm sharing my experiences of being queer and trans. And a lot of that is related to spirituality for me, but then also just kind of doing memes and having fun in a very surreal space, and sharing that as like video content, live social content. And it's kind of a way in these gaming spaces to do a kind of the gaming spaces, online social space a lot of the time has been overrun by right-wing propaganda, and this is a way to network queer and trans people and do a kind of de-radicalization propaganda and bring theory and language work that I'm doing here with my poetry community in New York to this like very weird, very accessible rhizomatic space online. So yeah, some of those ideas I brought into this project, but that's kind of what I've been up to.
Yeah, and this is a screenshot of Hex. Hex, can you see it? Do you want to say a
I
little
do
bit
see
about
it, yeah.
what's happening here?
Yeah, I'm performing. That's like one of my old characters I made. So I made all of these avatars from scratch in free 3D modeling software. Anyways, I'm in this world. I'm performing for a few people in the world and on a live stream for like a glitch art festival. And it's like noise and samples and some kind of I do a little bit of like experimental techno. There's a big nightlife scene in VR. So yeah, I like to work with samples and noise. I'm already kind of combining and bringing together collaging different ideas and technologies together, being in VR, and so bringing samples and noise and everything into that is kind of bringing another set of collaging of voices and existing digital files together. So that's what I'm doing here.
And so just a little bit more about myself. As Jesse said, I'm doing a PhD here at Concordia, and I'm looking at this intersection of queer embodiment and virtual reality and how queer folks are building content in VR chat, which is a platform made of almost entirely user-driven content. So it really provides insight into how people are making things. It can be very messy, very glitchy. You'll hear us say glitch a lot. So it's a really special and quite unregulated space, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. It has very early internet vibes. So here's a picture of one of my avatars. This is actually another collaboration I did. So it's an avatar that's in this world. I put this together with one of my friends in the drag community named Chevy Lace. And we 3D scanned a bunch of their props and costumes and put them into this world that they then ran around and did performances in as a way of archiving like the wigs and the shoes and the stuff they were making and kind of like revealing other aspects of them, which you typically only see on stage. Let's see. Oh yeah, and so this is another avatar I've been making. This is more of a personal project. I'm really interested in touch and intimacy and sensations that arise in VR. There's this phenomenon called phantom touch, where you can touch another person's body and virtually, and then your brain will read it and create sensations for you. So this one has this kind of glassy skin around it, and I'm working on creating touch animations that are activated when someone else's avatar touches mine, so it'll be visualized on that like extra skin on the body. And we saw a little picture of Hex doing their stuff in VR. So she spends a lot of time in clubs, dancing, that kind of thing. I am a very like chill person. I can get a little activated or overstimulated in those environments. So this is what it looks like when I hang out in VR. So here's me and a bunch of my friends. We're sitting around a fire. Another friend of ours is singing to us. And I've just found, as a non-binary person, and I've had trouble sometimes finding community in the physical world, that this kind of experience, cuddling with my friends in virtual space, brings me so much joy and euphoria and affirmation. So we're going to get into our project, and we'll talk a little bit about the theoretical stuff in a few minutes, but I thought I would show you first part of our process for getting into this work. So Hex, can you see the text well enough to read it? Oh, it looks
Okay,
like
I'm unmuted.
okay.
It's very loud here, so I'm just trying to.
Can you see
Yeah.
the text well enough to read it? Because I thought we could read back and forth the different parts that we wrote.
Okay, cool. All right. I feel like juxtapose is a catch-all term for anything in art that doesn't try to cohere. Like if you want to do more than one thing, you should only do two things. You should only speak in binary and contrast. I like the term aggregate for pulling lots of pieces together.
It also makes me think of all the pieces that don't fit, that don't join, that form cracks, and the mistakes that erode in the Control-Z graveyard.
I love the Control-Z graveyard, the spirit realm of the undo. Juxtapose implies the value of contrast for meaning that emerges from contrast when I want meaning that comes from collapse.
Yes. Also thinking about how meaning emerges from a plane of immanence, which comes from Deleuze, within which all potentials are nested, and how meaning can emerge from the threads that were never followed, where the weave is too loose to form material.
Or meaning that never arrives, and we are only looking at all of the collaged pieces splitting apart at the seams or calling out each other's material form.
Calling out each other's material form. They never congeal into an identity. Instead, they animate multiplicity.
Aggregate, like a truckload of gravel. Aggregate, a material or structure formed from a loosely compacted mass of fragments or particles.
The body is a site of multiplicity, fragmentation, becoming.
Aggregate leads to multitude, which leads to collective, which leads to what comes before and what comes after.
Queer space-making practices are a site of multiplicity, fragmentation, becoming. So that's just a snapshot, and this is just a Google Doc of how we've been writing back and forth and bringing in the theory and looking at how we wanted to frame the project. So this is why it's called Aggregate Multitude. So now I'm going to play a walkthrough of the project so you can see it, and then I think it's easier for people to see it first, and then we'll describe a little bit more about what you're seeing. Is that playing? I know that.
It's playing. I don't hear sound.
Okay, you're not hearing sound. Sorry, we've got a glitch. No big deal. Oh, you know what? I turned my audio down. About how we begin. Orientations are about how we begin, how we proceed from here, which affects how what is there appears and how it presents itself. In other words, we encounter things as coming from different sides, as well as having different sides. There's a 0 point of orientation, the point from which the world unfolds, and which makes what is there over there.
And retain flesh. We should have been together. Transcend and retain flesh. We should have been together. For a moment, I'd prompted myself into 2D output. Aura. For a moment, I'd prompted myself into 2D output. Aura. Pink marks trace where the face gasket meets my cheeks. Her spine folded. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover. Her spine folded. Lifeline, wormhole, camera, are you in or out? I started pulling lifeline, wormhole, camera, are you in or out? Her spine folded.
There's no such thing as a normal body here. In the middle of a soft.
Yeah, this is a little bit weirder to walk outside of my body compared to last time I was in the octopus avatar.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't feel as weird.
I'm still inside my body. You're outside of yours?
Yeah, I just stepped back in my play space.
And she slid into body
Than before.
There's something that'll make you like burst up into the sky. I'm not sure why.
Her spine folded.
Just another happy glitch.
In the middle, she slid into a wormhole. Her spine folded. In the middle,
Yep, let's do it.
She slid into a wormhole.
we should have been together. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover. World, dissolve, lifeline. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover.
The cord. Slither
World,
under it.
dissolve, lifeline. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover.
We dance
World,
gingerly.
dissolve, lifeline. In the middle
Slither
of
under
a
it.
soft moment with my lover. In the
It's like
middle,
we're outside
we
the
dance
spheres
with
from
my
T's
lover.
world.
World, dissolve,
those were
slither,
there.
line.
Collide with
In the
each other.
middle of a soft we moment dance with my lover, gingerly. World, dissolve, slither under it. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover.
Than before.
World,
I reach
dissolve,
behind my head
line.
to to rearrange
In the middle
the
of a
cord,
soft moment with my
slither
lover.
under it.
World, dissolve,
Or
lifeline.
I reach behind
In the
my
middle
head
of a soft
to
moment with my lover.
rearrange the cord.
In the middle
my
of
second world, dissolve, lifeline. Slither under it. I am more aware of my back body than before. I reach behind my head to rearrange the cord, slither under it. Or I reach behind my head to rearrange the cord, slither under it. We dance gingerly, slither under it.
Oh, thanks, y'all. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the theoretical ideas behind it and explain to you some of what you were seeing in that piece. So just to explain a little bit of it, we worked with a set of shared assets, meaning we both created 3D models and some textures and forms. And then it's almost like we had this shared set of Lego blocks that we were both building worlds out of. So the first part was the world that I created. The second part was the world that Hex created. And this was, again, exploring this idea of aggregate, multitude, things that aren't quite joining, parallel worlds, etc. So one of the texts that we worked with was Queer Phenomenology by Sarah Ahmed. And this is a text where she's emphasizing the spatial and relational aspects of phenomenology, which is basically just the study of lived experience, working from the notion that our consciousness arises through our engagement with the world, and it's this kind of inextricable set of things in this feedback loop. So she looks at phenomenology via orientation, and looks at how we understand where we are in the world by turning to or away from what's around us. So that to me really connected with VR. This is a picture of my partner, Kara, who I met in VR and recently met in the physical world. And we spend a lot of our time just exploring worlds. And this is a picture of her going into a new world, and it's almost like you're a baby every single time. You're turning around, you're trying to feel things, you're touching, you're checking what the limits and the boundaries are. So right away when you're in VR, it becomes a lot about orientation and disorientation. So something that Ahmed does is she also links phenomenological orientation to sexual orientation. And she emphasizes how our desires don't just motivate us to turn toward what we desire, but impact how we inhabit space. So this interpretation of hers challenges the notion of queerness as a discrete, fixed identity, as something that lives inside your body and as something that is visible on your body, but instead frames queerness as a question of relationality, spatiality, and temporality. So this is something that I've experienced both in the physical and the virtual world. What's fun about the virtual world is that there are new sensations, ways of embodying yourself, entering one another's bodies. So this is the glitch moment. You saw it in the video a couple seconds ago when Hex and I were both standing there and talking about, like, am I inside my body? Are you inside your body? Where are we? So here I'm vibing in this disembodied glitch, again with my partner Kara, and we're just making out in that space and multiplying. Like, there are 6 of us, and we can turn around and see all these different fragmented forms and experience this beautiful, diffuse, strange form of desire. Here's another one. This is, again, like a little screenshot from the video you just saw. So it's not just through relation with other beings, other virtual people. Oh, we're glitching. That I think you're experiencing this kind of orientation. I'm just going to keep talking because we're going to embrace the glitch. But through objects as well. So those glittery spheres that you'll probably see again in a moment have sound embedded in them. So they're bits of poetry and other kind of sounds we made together. And when you go in the virtual world, you can pick them up and you can pass them through your body. It's all spatialized sound. So it's like you're also integrated with the environment in that way. So finally about Ahmed, so she is also expanding the concept of disorientation, which is obviously an integral aspect of orientation, beyond the idea of mere dizziness or feeling nauseous in your body. And she wants to encompass the ways in which disorientation can emerge from the misalignment between the movements, desires, and experiences of queer and also racialized bodies, which she talks about a lot, and the normative structures that govern spaces. So meaning that if you have a non-normative body or gender expression, you might find yourself walking into space, like maybe a very heteronormative or a very white space, and you might feel disoriented, but also your presence disorients the space itself. So the implicit suggestion in the work of other phenomenologists who have worked with orientation and disorientation is that overcoming disorientation enables the subject, this is the universal subject, to regain its straight, upright, future-oriented position. And what Ahmed does is challenges this view, which she says reinforces the notion of the normative universal subject. Instead, she's arguing that disorientation is a vital, unsettling force that highlights the fluidity and complexity of queer subjectivity. And she suggests that queer politics could involve disorientation as a means of deviation driven by desire, which can foster, for example, queer space-making practices, for example, in VR. So here's another shot of this is Hex's world. And there's this moment we talked about, and I guess if you're more curious about this moment, you can watch the video that's in this space. But it's this medical exam room, and we were talking with one another about some of very non-affirming experiences we've had when it comes to accessing care. And then I brought this exam room asset in, and I wasn't sure, if and how I wanted to use it, but we both decided to integrate it into our worlds because it was this link to the physical world, and creating in the virtual world allowed us to bring it in and glitch it and remake it and reform it. And both of our portals are located in this space. So it's also this space that we're reforming into a portal into one another's worlds. And then so how we created some of the assets. So this is a 3D model I created in collaboration with AI. So I put this bit of text into an AI text to 3D modeling program. This is the quote: "If a face is inverted and becomes queer or deprived of its significance, then such a deprivation would not be livable simply as loss, but as the potential for new lines, or for new lines to gather as expressions that we do not yet know how to read." So this is what it spit out. I think it was just simply grasping onto the idea of face, and then with all these other words in the prompt, this is what came out. So this is also something I was curious about, like what happens when we put really abstract text into these programs, what comes out? So I'll let Hex talk about this part. These are some of the models that she created.
Hold on. Okay, I'm unmuted. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we wanted to, like, we were kind of passing back and forth the writing and talking through our ideas. We also wanted to start from this same kind of library of materials. We're using Unity, which is a game development platform, to create and upload these worlds to VR chat so that we can enter them. But we threw a bunch of assets in one folder together and then drew from that to make our worlds. So you'll see those round crystal things are kind of expanded out to like a different scale in T's world. But these I developed these procedurally and using inputs from 2D image textures, so grayscale, and applying the values to a sphere or to a plane, and then having it deform that plane just entirely procedurally, and then exporting that and then getting inside of it and seeing what it feels like to be in a form that is entirely abstract or looks like a terrain or landscape and then moves. It's an impossible terrain or landscape and it moves away from that, or to be inside of a sphere that kind of swallows up. There's no more horizon. There's no necessary, like, there's no way. I'm interested in this idea of not being able to orient. And so kind of going off of what Sarah Ahmed's talking about with the new lines that emerge from our disorientation. What does it mean to stay with those lines and make room for the inability to orient, or the inability to fix something that might feel like a glitch or might not be totally recognizable. So these were just different forms that I was playing with. And again, so the textures I was putting in were noise textures. They were entirely like mathematically randomized. So yeah, that's one of the cool things with doing this in VR is you can walk inside of these spaces that haven't been and have a embodied experience with forms that that are entirely abstract or don't have to be created in the real world or aligned around a certain purpose, like getting from this point to that point, or dividing genders or things like that. You can explore these different relationships to objects and space this way. That's a screenshot from Unity, dropping, that's T working on their world, dropping one of these crystal objects in, and then you go inside of it, and one of the cool things that happens is there's a front face and a back face to all objects in 3D, and depending on how you have it set up, you might only be able to see the front face, and then if you step inside a sphere, you can't see the back faces. So it might look opaque from the outside, and then you go inside and you can see right out of it, and it's completely gone. So there's these really cool things that can happen with space. And yeah, just our little conversation on Discord, talking through sound, talking through our notes, uploading recordings of our notes to SoundCloud, kind of trying to figure out how we want to work with all of this material. And this was, so yeah, I'm going to talk just a little bit more about living in the glitch. That's been one of the really amazing things for me about VR. I wrote a zine about my experiences living in VR, called "I Don't Want a Body Anymore," and in it, and this is a point where I connected with what T is writing about in some of their really, you'll hear that near the end, but some of their really amazing scenes, vignettes from their experience waking up from sleeping in VR and seeing their partners trackers all glitched out and like they're folded up in one corner of the room. And it's a very surreal experience to be in VR. And those kind of breaks where our motion track, like I'm completely motion tracked right now, and you've probably seen my body glitching out. But when these things kind of happen in VR, when your motion trackers stop working, or something's always going wrong, or a little bit, there's always kind of a material of the world you're in that you're kind of pushing through. There's language for it here, and it's kind of funny. Like people will laugh about it, or take time, get your trackers fixed, or don't, or this is just, we can have fun with this. It's a really cool experience where I want that more in the IRL space, where, if my body isn't showing up to the world the way the world is expecting it, there's room for that. There's language for that, and we aren't oriented around just arriving and productivity, and so that's just a really wonderful experience for me as a queer and trans person body, in this world. Not something I'd experienced before. So this is a shot from one of the rooms that T made, and you stand in this squishy jello-like substance, and then it leaves impressions all around the room as you move it, glitched out, and so your touch is kind of replicated around you. And then there's the glitch where we were kind of coming out of our bodies, that you saw in the video, and T kind of found this and couldn't really explain it. It's kind of mysterious sometimes when you have a glitch like that happen, and it happens a lot. But it's cool to be able to, in these worlds, what T did was make it a site. They put a mirror there, so that when we're not trying to fix or change necessarily the glitch that happened, the getting stuck, but we're making a dwelling around it, where we're giving it a mirror so that when we arrive in it, we can reflect on ourselves, and look back at ourselves. We talked a lot about the experience of wearing all of the headset and the wires and everything while we're in VR. We're constantly stepping over the wires or adjusting things, or feeling the face gasket against our face. So there's this movement of awareness that is very fluid between being completely transported into this surreal world and always being reminded of another world that you're part of. Again, that's such a fascinating experience, always stepping over the wire, always kind of shifting awarenesses in and out. And for me, it says a lot to my trans experience of, I feel one way in my body, and I just feel this way, and then I go out in the world and, oh my God, everyone's reading something entirely different. And this kind of in and then out, it was a phenomenological experience that I tried to explore in my world. You kind of drop into these valleys, and then you rise up, and then you see what's around, and then you drop into a valley again. It has a lot to do with where I grew up in Appalachia, and the hills and the hollows and the fracturing of time. But these movements start to fracture things, and those fractures can start to have relationships. So some of the theory I was looking at, I'll just briefly mention this. So some of this was coming through and has been coming through, building off of queer phenomenology for me. Disability studies. So this was the Crypt Technoscience Manifesto. This is from the intro. Crypt Technoscience is committed to interdependence as political technology. We position the crypt politics of interdependence as a technoscientific phenomenon, the weaving of relational circuits between bodies, environments, and tools to create non-innocent frictional access. I love that idea of frictional access, the arriving and the orienting, or the that reminds us of our relation and reminds us of our accountability to each other, and reminds us of, and doesn't try to speed through it, but takes time for those relations. Also thinking about the Undercommons and Fred Moten, what I wanted to do with these shapes in this world was move away from this idea of orientation around a center point and out, which comes from a colonial military, as Fred Moten describes it, relationship between center and closure and frontier, this safety of the center. And I wanted to move to something that was decentered and emergent. And then this is a poet colleague here in New York, Joselia Rebecca Hughes. They're super brilliant. And this is, I really love this, and I was thinking about it a lot. If there's a poetics of the cell, it is a poetics of spaces, enclosures, liquidities, and permeabilities. If there are fictions of the cell, they are fictions of death that suspend dominating determinations of purpose. If there are logics of the cell, they're aplenty and choral. So just where do we go from Sarah Ahmed? Where do we go with the disorientation of queerness? I'm hopeful that these moments of disorientation lead us to the experience of I am a fragment, and I have a relationship, a frictional relationship through this glitch that reminds me of what I am connected to, and develops this kind of multitude or this choral experience rather than a singular point of origin. That's the end of our slideshow. So yeah, those are, yeah.
I know we're getting close to time, but we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah,
So Hex and I would both like to end by just reading out some of our writing, some of the poetry that we were both working on. Hex, did you want to start, or should I?
No, I think, we read what I was, you should read yours. I don't really have any things specifically for this, but I will echo off of you if there's anything.
It's embarrassing. People are seeing my.
It's so messy.
No, I know. That's always what people say. Oh, now I'm all okay.
That's exactly what it's. Yeah.
No.
You just got to save it to the desktop and then upload it.
So I'm just going to read this, which I recently wrote. I did my first comprehensive exam for my PhD, and I just decided to end with experimental poetry instead of a conclusion. So this is that, but I wanted to share it. I haven't shared it with anybody yet. Queer flesh as transcendent immanence. In VR, my flesh is shimmering immanence. My physical and virtual bodies are, quote, as two segments of one soul's circular course, one soul movement in its two phases. I disorient myself, never fully here or there, called in and out by sounds and sights that shake time and space. Trackers, headset, and controllers, quote, accumulate impressions on the skin. Pink marks trace where the face gasket meets my cheeks. My foot tracker twists and my leg shoots through my chest. A shiver runs down my spine. Phantom sense upends me, molds me into a Mobius strip, lined with the flesh of latent possibility. And then Hex intervened.
Oh my God. Sorry, there's another voice coming through your poem. I'm obsessed with this Mobius strip idea for the continuum between IRL body and the tech virtual body, one flowing into the next. That's an awesome idea.
The headset, an extension of vision, an assemblage, a portal to multidimensional phantom touch. I am more aware of my back bodies than before. I reach behind my head to rearrange the cord and slither under it. We dance gingerly. It's a lifeline. If it breaks, my second world dissolves. Virtual cracks birth queer bodies. In the middle of a soft moment with my lover, her spine folds and she slips into a wormhole. She keeps talking since her perception remains where it had been. There is no such thing as a normal body here. We are all, quote, lost, undone, thrown. Bodies, quote, do not dwell in spaces that are exterior, but rather take shape by dwelling. I dwell in my living room, in a forest, in the arms of my lover, in a nest of pillows. I fall asleep, glitching into dreaming, still shaped by the dwelling of my trackers. I lend them my bodies so that they may, quote, inscribe upon and give me their resemblance. When I shift, they become blocked, and I de-shape and reshape. My lover stirs and leans over to kiss me, inviting me forth from, quote, atmospheric existence. But I have transcended my avatar body. I watch her sweetly caress it. That's not me, I'm up here, quote, completely turned inside out under my own eyes. My body slip away, and I fill the whole room, my immanence, quote, coupling with the flesh of the world. I can still feel her kisses. We are the body without organs, dancing a, quote, set of practices, forever attaining, never reaching. We are open, diffuse systems that can be cloned, walked through, penetrated. Quote, on the body without organs, we penetrate and are penetrated. On it, we love. Our desire drives us to embrace, but when we lean in, our vision fragments, arms hanging mid-air, never caught by other bodies. We're, quote, fed up with seeing with our eyes, talking with our tongue, thinking with our brain. We become octopus bodies, quote, full of gaiety, ecstasy, and dance, flipped upside down bodies, called to, quote, walk on our head, sing with our sinuses, see through our skin, not knowing whether our eyeballs will follow our skulls or if our feet will shoot through our ears. The body without organs is, quote, what remains when you take everything away. We are away. Our body is installed in the portal between two worlds, cradled in the amniotic fluid of an egg, suspended in collective queer fantasy. So that's that. Thank you, everybody. And we've got a little time for questions, either from the chat or IRL or from the virtual, I don't know, from whatever realm. Yeah, Laura, oh, do we have a mic?
Hey, thank you so much. I have a question about workflow in the collaboration, and I'm just wondering, like you mentioned the Google Doc as a means of talking back and forth to generate ideas, but as you were like constructing the worlds, would you be collaborating in VR chat through VR avatars, or what kind of like, what mode did you work in?
Yeah, good question. Multitude of fragmented modes, I think. So just like VR chat doesn't allow you to co-build in real time in any sort of sophisticated way. So we weren't constructing the worlds together. We were making them independently out of VR and then going into one another's like work in progress worlds. Yeah, so, but it went into all these different forms. Like sometimes it's like, oh, let's do a Google Doc. Sometimes it's conversations on Discord, and felt very much like we were living together in all these different forms. Like we're so familiar with all these different ways of relating to one another. Like Discord is the main way that people in VR chat communicate together. I don't know, is that answering your question / Hex? Do you want to jump in here and make some comments?
Yeah, no, we would meet up in our worlds together and talk about it, and then go away and do a little bit of work and then come back. And yeah, I really loved the writing process of writing into each other's stuff. But yeah, not much else to add there.
Thank you.
I have a question while people are thinking. Yeah, thanks both of you, by the way. I'm really interested in kind of this notion of accessibility that comes into play in VR and how it kind of gives you access to things that might not be possible in this IRL world. But at the same time, VR can be a very disorienting and inaccessible platform for not only the physical body, but also kind of who has access to VR. How do you kind of get involved? So I'm wondering if perhaps you can maybe talk a bit about how you see the kind of future of VR, or what, like how you kind of deal with those frictions of accessibility.
Yeah, great question. Hex, do you want to start? I have some thoughts, but I'm curious since you were talking about the some of the accessibility theory.
Yeah, what you said something the other day on the roundtable that about VR and where it's kind of placed as a niche experience that I really loved. But yeah, there's a couple of levels to it. One for me at least is I when COVID kind of closed down queer spaces for art, for gathering, and that was where I felt like myself, gathering in that way. And then what I found in VR was I could be embodied with other people without leaving my apartment. And so I've just been doing a lot of learning and experiencing for myself what my body is capable of, after having COVID, after just changes in what I have energy and physical capability for. So it's been a space where I've been able to go and have social connection. You can go to a club, you don't have to drink. The sound is like right there on your ears. You can step out, the minute that you're tired. You don't have to take an hour bus ride home. And so for me, it opened up these ways of moving on top of being able to be whatever body I wanted, and opened up social spaces for me. So, but then, yeah, it was very uncomfortable at first to be in it. And it's not for a lot of people. And there's a lot of inaccessibility. There's kind of limited text chat options, or so there's another kind of set of questions of access. But I think virtual space, I think that, queer and trans space IRL in New York is very, very hard to access. New York is not a friendly city for IRL access, especially ongoing pandemic. So yeah, we can think about access and virtual space and VR chat and the spaces that we make online, and social media or other virtual platforms. Those give a different kind of access, and I really, we need to keep having virtual events and keep providing these other ways to connect with each other.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I kind of touched on this the other day in the roundtable, but I don't see a world where we're all in VR. I don't want that world. I know most people don't want that world. Several folks in the room tried out the project and lasted maybe like 10 minutes. Like, it can induce a lot of nausea. It's very uncomfortable. It's like it's physically taxing to wear VR, not to mention like it's thousands and thousands of dollars to buy the kind of VR headsets that both Hex and I are using to visit these kind of complex worlds and hang out with large groups of people. So it's not accessible at all for those reasons. I think something that both Hex and I are really interested in is, we live in these spaces, but then how do we kind of bring or ask about what's happening in these spaces into the physical world? Like how then do we translate and like think in a more multidimensional way about virtual queer bodies, physical queer bodies, the interrelationship between the two. And there's a little bit of that happening, like a lot of VR chat people stream on Twitch, so you can watch something like you're watching Hex now. This is very similar to a stream, and a lot of folks engage in that way, especially if they don't have like financial access to something like this but want to participate in the world. but yeah, like I don't think, I want everyone who wants to experience VR to be able to experience it, and I do think it should be more affordable, but I don't think the goal is for everyone to be in VR. I think it's more like what's happening here and what can it speak to in the physical world in terms of accessibility also.
Thank you.
Cool. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you both. That was great. I loved your discussion about the glitch and all of these kinds of ways of the glitch being something productive and being kind of, because of its imperfection, it has all of these resonances for both your work and in the VR realm. And I was wondering, like, is that glitchiness something that you kind of like bring into your IRL life, like the way that kind of it becomes these zones of refusal and non-participation and things like that, and how you find that kind of like translation? You're talking about what you learn in VR worlds kind of being able to be taken into your kind of IRL life. And I was wondering if the glitch is something that happens that way.
Great question. I'm going to let Hex answer first again.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I guess it gave me so much of experiencing the glitch that I got to understand that is what I was experiencing IRL, this glitching of what the world gender would world, or like the outside world, what that gender, what those gender needs would be trying to assign to me and glitching over me. So I think it gave me some language to talk about that. And yeah, I guess it also helped me realize how much I like a mediated experience, a feeling of like the feeling of the headset, and like the ability to like control volume or to change up my trackers or things like that. That's I'm like, oh, I kind of want that IRL, and I don't know how to have that kind of sensation of mediation or agency in that.
Yeah, was that the end of your sentence?
That's the end of that sentence.
Okay, I couldn't tell if you glitched. Yeah, I think, like I was thinking a little bit about beforehand, like I was talking about glitch feminism the other day, and it, like, I think I got it theoretically, and I was seeing myself kind of glitching here and there. Like I was doing drag at the time when I first read it, and I was like, oh, that's a glitchy practice. Like here I am on stage doing this thing and morphing into these different bodies and stuff like that. But I think then being in VR and experiencing the glitch on my body like 60 times a night brought me into this space that Hex is kind of talking about like what happens when the body breaks, what happens when it's not like, and I move through the world with a lot of like able privilege, or however you want to say it. Like it's not something I feel like I encounter a lot because the world is built for bodies like mine, even in terms of my appearance. So it's like a lot of smooth sailing, and then experiencing that within my body and seeing the patience and care and joy that those moments are often met with, like Hex was talking about, like, oh, my tracker's messed up, I'm in the ceiling, and people will just wait or help you out or like hold you in that space. So I don't know, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but like that was such a beautiful experience. And then I think expanded my notion of embodiment and how we inhabit the physical world, and also like seeing how it's not built for so many of us, perhaps all of us in some ways. I think that's kind of how my ideas of the glitches that were happening there are entering this realm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're at time. Thank you so much, everybody. It was really a joy. Thank you for joining us in this way, Hex.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, T.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for coming into the space, and yeah, thanks for joining us online for those that did, and Hex for speaking from online. We're gonna wrap this up and close the Zoom shortly. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it's still on.